What's up, YouTubers? I want to talk about Martin Gurri's book, "The Revolt of the Public and the Crisis of Authority." It's not exactly the name of the book, but he wrote a book in 2014, and then I believe it was republished in 2018. And it's basically about the loss of faith in governments, or what I call the loss of legitimacy in governments, and how all over the Western world there's been a crisis of authority, which has led to the elections of Donald Trump, which led to the Brexit crisis, or the Brexit vote, which led to the Yellow Vest crisis in France, and many, many other crises across the Western world. He also, in the book, he talks about how it's basically social media undermining the governments. The spread of information vis-a-vis the internet has caused a lack or breaking down of trust in government. I would just call it the loss of legitimacy. Like right now in the United States, I think the media has about a 20 or 30% approval rating. So 80%, 70 to 80% of the people don't trust anything. That's how we get the proliferation of fake news. No one knows who to believe or what to believe anymore. So Martin Gurri talks about it in his book. He talks about how once you can mobilize millions of people to march in the street vis-a-vis social media, at any moment you can bring down a government. At any moment you can cause a crisis of confidence. I also think the recent action with GameStop, that's another example of this, where society is actually breaking down. And basically what he says in his book, he thinks this could go to what some people call, what's the word he uses, nihilism. This could go towards nihilism, where the left and the right in various countries burn the whole thing down as opposed to fix it. And I think that's a possibility. He also talks about how as these governments, the Western world crumbles, this might not lead to liberty. A lot of people think this will lead to liberty and freedom. He doesn't think so. He thinks it's a possibility, but he doesn't think so. What could come after this is just a return to barbarism. Or what the word he uses is nihilism, where the people come to power, they don't change anything, they just burn everything down. The reason I mention all this is because of all the protests happening, the lack of faith in the future. We can look at the recent election of Joseph Biden. Already there's people on the left protesting it, and already there's people who don't welcome the new administration and aren't going to cooperate. There's already massive amounts of Republicans not going to cooperate with the Biden administration. So it'll be interesting to see how that happens, but we saw in France the Yellow Vest protests, and so far that's gone away and hasn't come back. But I still don't think there's any legitimacy in the EU right now. And I still think with COVID going on in the United Kingdom, and COVID is it might not, but it could bring down one of the governments there. It could bring down, well, what it can do is it can show a lack of faith in the system there, and that's going to undermine the UK. It's going to undermine the EU, the way they're handling this coronavirus crisis. Right now, as I speak, Spain is locked down. The UK is locked down. Now, all of the EU, I don't know how they're locked down, but I think partially they're locked down in Germany. Well, I think this is going to lead to a crisis. I think it's going to be hard to fund the government through the normal tax system. Eventually, they're going to have to print so much money that it's going to lead to either competitive devaluations or unplanned devaluations, which could accelerate the price of Bitcoin and gold. So, because Martin Gurri's in the news, I just wanted to bring that up and talk about his book. I also want to talk about, I was listening to a recent episode of Tom Woods. He had on a British humorist, I forget his name. He wrote the book on tax, the history of taxes. I forget what it was called exactly. It's Dominic Bisbee, I think. And Dominic made a very, very interesting comment on digital nomads that I've never heard talked about in the libertarian or just in general. I haven't heard anyone in the media talk about the proliferation of digital workers. He was just pointing out, Dominic was pointing out, with Bitcoin, with all the different ways of getting paid, it's going to be almost impossible for governments to tax these people anymore. And he said, as I already know, Americans are one of the only peoples that are taxed around the world wherever they live. But everyone else is taxed wherever they're resident. So once they leave the country, they don't have to pay taxes. But he pointed out, despite all this, it's going to be more and more difficult for governments to attack these digital nomads, or these digital, I call them digital workers, because Dominic's pointing out where we're going with all this. We're eventually going to go to a point where you can live wherever you want in the world. Your employer can be anyone in the world, and it'd be hard to tax anyone on any of this, especially if you use any of these digital currencies. If you're outside of the legacy banking system, it'll be harder and harder for the government to really extract its taxes, which I'm not saying that's going to accelerate the destruction or the bankruptcy of governments, but it was interesting that he made that point that with a digital economy, again, this is Dominic saying, with a digital economy, with crypto coin, Bitcoin and crypto coins, people are now getting to pay. This can be very, very difficult for any government to tax. And it's going to be very difficult for any government to say, hey, if these guys are traveling, where exactly are they domiciled to pay taxes, unless they state it. If they're going from country to country to country, which country gets that tax revenue? Because as we know, governments don't like to share. So, like, who's going to get the money? How are they going to get it? How are they going to actually collect it? That was an interesting conversation to listen to. And I haven't heard much about it in the libertarian community, so it's kind of interesting that we're now living in a world where you can work wherever you want in the world. You can have an employer in Great Britain. One of my friends used to work for an employer in Great Britain. He lives and continues to live in Thailand, but he's a U.S. citizen. And, well, who knows how he declared all that. I'm guessing he didn't pay any tax on it. But that's now more the norm than ever. You work for whoever you work for. You get paid in whatever currency, foreign currency, or whatever. You get paid in whatever digital currency you agree to. And very little tax, if any, is taken out. And then you could, be passing through a country that has a tax, an income tax. But how do you even pay it, and how are they even going to collect it? Anyways, Dominic was talking about that, how that's going to change everything. I think that's true. I think with a loss of legitimacy in the Western world, and with a digital economy where people are moving wherever they want, that's going to accelerate the destruction of Western governments. So if they can't fund it through traditional taxes, they'll have to start funding it through inflating the currency. So that's what I see happening. Currency is going to get inflated away, or rather, local currencies will devalue against Bitcoin and gold, possibly land. I don't know. But we're living now in a world where you can get paid in whatever currency you want. You can live wherever you want. You can work wherever you want. And it's going to be, like Dominic said in this interview, it'll be hard for the government to stop this. It's not impossible, but very difficult for them to do much of anything about it. So if Martin Gurri is right and we go towards more of a decentralized economy, which I think he's right, and if it's a decentralized digital economy, that's going to be great. If we go towards a nihilistic type situation, that won't be good. But there's really no solution to that, because I'm like with him. We're either going towards a nihilist type situation or a more decentralized digital type economy and world. I'm hoping for the decentralized digital type world, not the nihilist, but that's just my optimism. But we're either going one to the other. Things are not going to keep the same anymore because the government can't keep things together. So anyways, I just wanted to make a short video on what I've been watching this week. Martin Gurri's been in the press more and more. If you don't know who he is, Google him. Google it or put it in YouTube. He's done a lot of interviews. They're very fascinating. I'd also look at Tom Woods' interview with Dominic, or the history of taxation. I think that's Dominic Bisbee, if I remember right. And he had a very astute observation on the digital economy and how digital nomads, which aren't really talked about, but as more and more people leave the crumbling economies of the West and move into East or South America, Central South, or what people call the South, but as they move into, less developed countries and live, work, and play there, and work for international companies and or just work for other people as contractors, it's going to be harder and harder for them meaning the government, to collect these taxes, which means they will probably resort more and more to taxing whoever's left in the economies back in these first world countries, and more and more just relying on the printing of money. We've seen with the COVID what they're going to do. They're going to basically print money and borrow money and just devalue their currencies. We've seen that's the plan. So that's probably why Bitcoin's shooting up to the moon. And like I said in a previous video, today is Saturday, the 6th of February, 2021. We're at $40,000 a coin for Bitcoin. I think ETH is going to take off. I just don't think it's a currency you want to be in long term. But short term, it could really outperform Bitcoin. That's just, Johnny's opinion. But leave it in the comments where you think Bitcoin and ETH are going. Leave in the comments anything you have about digital nomads and how it will become increasingly difficult for governments, first world governments, or any government for that matter, to tax these people. The fact that Dominic Bisbee, I think that's his name, he was making that comment. I haven't heard anyone talk about it. But for the longest time, I've been waiting for someone to make a comment on this kind of new trend where people are leaving the U.S. of all ages, living, retiring, working in other countries. They're leaving the rats are leaving these sinking first world country ships for other places. How it's becoming, despite the loss of liberty, despite the loss of financial privacy, it's still becoming very difficult for these countries to follow you everywhere and tax you. I think that's why these first world countries like the US and the EU are going to come out with their own digital currencies, because it's the only way they're going to be able to track you and get their pound of flesh. And even then, when they do that, if you want to be in the network, you have to use their coins. They're called I forget what they're called, but the Fed and the EU have papers written with their digital currencies of these countries, and they'll force you to download a wallet to get your government benefits. If you say you're doing anything, it'll be like Chinese credit, like they'll cut you out of the system. But I'm sure you'll be able to sell this Fed currency, the Fed coin or Euro coin, into Bitcoin for 50 cents on the dollar. You're willing to take a haircut, you'll probably be able to get out. And it's going to be easier and easier to avoid this at a price. Liberty comes at a price. But for people who want to pay that price, they're just going to leave. In fact, it's more interesting. I'm on Telegram. I'm seeing more and more people want to move to rural parts of the U.S. or they want to leave the country completely, go to places like Mexico or Central America or South America or Asia or wherever they want to go. But they're not keeping quiet. They're talking about it more and more. So this is now going to become possibly a big trend. We'll see. Because I don't think the economy is going to stay together too much longer. I think the Biden administration and the EU are letting news bits come out that the economy is not anywhere near as strong as they have been in suggesting. And they're trying to formalize or normalize a real big boost in the money supply. And I suspect a lot of people who are counting on the government to bail them out, I'm talking about small, like not big businesses, but individual people expecting a big check from the government, like you. But I think they're going to be disappointed. At least if they're in the U.S., they're going to be disappointed. But I don't know. If they do a big check, it could be very inflationary. I suggest you buy some gold or Bitcoin or something, or a piece of land in Latin America, a piece of land in the States. At least you could live on it and grow some stuff and trade. But anyways, I think they're trying to get people used to the idea of another big subsidy and handout to big business. And there's going to be a hue and outcry over that I just can't even imagine. That's just going to accelerate, like Martin Gurri talks about, more distrust in government. Could it lead to a very nihilistic outcome, or it could lead to more, what I hope for is more digitalization, or what I call decentralization of everything. I think from what we're seeing in Africa, Latin America, you're going to see decentralization on steroids, and it's going to be maybe not impossible, but very difficult for the government to come after people, get their money, tax them anymore. So you're going to see government aid programs kind of come to an end, or you'll get a check, but it won't purchase very much. One or the other or both. Anyways, that's my little rant for today. Like, share, leave a comment. Bam, and have a good weekend.